All right. In case you haven't heard, 2020 has been a bit of a rough year with the pandemic, among what feels like a million other things. You're probably a bit burnt out, which is why our first talk of the conference is a great way to start Heartifacts off. Our first presenters are Anjuan Simmons, and Dr. Aneika Simmons. Anjuan is a technologist with a successful track record of delivering technology solutions from the user interface to the database. He combines his experiences working at Big Four management consulting companies, as well as small technology startups to implement practical solutions that can be understood and scaled across organizations. He's an energetic and informative speaker who presents at conferences, seminars, schools, and community centers around the world on topics including agile software development, inclusion, and leadership. Anjuan's has an undergraduate degree in electrical engineering from the University of Texas at Austin and an MBA from Texas A&M University. Aneika teaches courses about leadership, organization behavior, and human resources at Sam Houston State University. She completed her doctorate degree in organizational behavior and human resources at Texas A&M University. Prior to pursuing her PhD, Dr. Simmons worked for Accenture and Capgemini Ernst & Young as an information technology consultant. She also has her master's degree in organizational communication from the University of Houston. The two of them will be sharing about how you can manage the burnout burndown. So here they are, Dr. Aneika Simmons and Anjuan Simmons.
Hello, I'm Anjuan Simmons.
And I'm Dr. Aneika Simmons.
And this is our talk on managing the burnout burndown. So let's get right to it. So if you're like me, then you work in software and you are just a real fan of the fact that we can turn any idea into working software, that anything that we think of, that we think our users want, can become code. And the excitement around this has been something that the media often reports on, the idea that these amazing companies that most of us use some of their software to figure out our daily lives started in garages as just ideas. And so there's a lot of press about how software is cool. In fact, this exuberance has even come from the levels of companies that most of us have heard of to even our day-to-day lives, and the idea that anyone can take a really easy to use language and then create something everyone carries around in their pockets to use every day. But there is a dark side to building software that is not as well covered in the media, and that's the fact that building software can be exhausting. And some of this exhaustion is due to the fact that software is an industry that's always changing. There are some new language or framework or technology that we need to use to do our daily work. And for a lot of people, this is really surprising because software is not like construction. And most of you watching this, you're in a building that has a floor and it has walls and a ceiling. And people actually did labor to lay that floor and hang the drywall on those walls and put up the light fixtures. And so we think about that as labor, and we don't think of building software as labor because often we're sitting at our desk and we may have some nice, well-crafted coffee next to us, and we are usually sitting in nice plush chairs. But building software is labor. It is work that it does extract a cost to the people who work in software development. And it's this dark side of software development that we often don't talk about. And the fact is that building software does put a mental and psychological burden on the people who write software. And those are the engineers, the testers, the project managers, everyone involved feels this burden. And so we don't really have a lot of language around this burden. And so we really wrote this talk to be able to help people who have worked in software development understand ways to cope. Another part of why software can be such a burden is the idea of always be shipping. And this is something that many of you have heard about, and maybe your manager or your manager who has used this term. And this is the idea that if we're always shipping features to users, then we are always justifying the reason that our team exists. But the reality is that any system that is always on will fail. And you have to take time to take the system offline and maintenance it, give it a chance to rest, give it a chance to be restored. And I am before you right now, and we both experience a degree of stress. And that stress, if left unmanaged, will lead to burnout. And burned out people burn out. They burn down valuable things, but they also go outside of structures that we set up for the team and for the company. And maybe you've seen people burn down code by introducing bugs when they usually have not done that, or they start to become argumentative and they sometimes burn down relationships with the people who are on the team. And then they go out of communication tools like Slack or the documentation that the team is using to track what we do. And you begin to see their contributions begin to slow down and trickle down over time. And so we really need to take stress and managing seriously. And a big reason why we wrote this talk is to do just that, to present a really easy to use framework. Because if you don't handle stress, then your team will begin to be handled by it. And you'll see always be shipping, turn to always be slipping as your team slips deadline after deadline as they labor under the weight of being burned out. Now, this is something that I'm happy to have my wife here with me because she's going to go over some of the academic research behind burnout.
Thank you, Anjuan. Yeah, so really we have an issue here, and it's called the burnout problem. Now, being married to someone who's built enterprise software for more than 2 decades, and myself, I used to work for Accenture and Capgemini Ernst & Young as a information technologist. I've also seen firsthand the experience of stress in this industry, but also as an academic, I see it as well. So as a business professor, I've studied the research that proves burnout isn't something that only happens to my family. It's an issue that is common to man. So before we go further, let's define burnout. We've looked at a number of academic and contemporary resources to get a working definition of burnout. And here's what we've come up with. As stated in the June 2016 issue of World Psychiatry, burnout is a psychological syndrome emerging as a prolonged response to chronic interpersonal stressors on the job. Now, stressors are what cause stress. Stress is what I feel. The 3 key dimensions of this response are: number 1, an overwhelming feeling of exhaustion; number 2, a feeling of cynicism and detachment from the job; and 3rd, a sense of ineffectiveness and a lack of accomplishment. So to put it simply, burnout is the ongoing feeling that today's resources aren't enough to meet tomorrow's demands. We're here today to focus on how burnout affects those who are part of software development teams, but it's a problem that spans multiple industries. The 3 dimensions of burnout. Let's kind of dig deeper. Emotional exhaustion. Well, this is an overall lack of energy and a sense that your emotional resources are being fully consumed by work. That means that when you come home, you feel like you have nothing left to give to the things or the people that you love. Depersonalization is the second one. This signifies an unfeeling, cynical, or even impersonal response toward the recipients of one's service. This is like when you go to the hospital to check on a friend and the nurse says there's a broken arm in room 2. That nurse has stopped seeing patients as people and just sees them as a problem to fix. And I've experienced that myself while I was addressed as just a problem, like, oh, the stomach ailment, they're in room 3. I had to get my stuff and go. So you got to be careful with that. And number 3, reduce personal accomplishment. This is marked by a tendency to evaluate oneself negatively, particularly with regard to work with clients. You begin to be overly critical of your work, which leads to self-criticism, which is no good. Now, widespread burnout. How widespread is it? Well, a Gallup workplace poll did a 3-part series last year on employees' burnout. It showed that burnout is a very common problem. In fact, 23% of 7,500 respondents reported feeling burned out at work very often or always, while 44% said they felt burned out sometimes. That means almost 2/3 of full-time workers experience some degree of burnout. You may be thinking, well, my team is highly engaged. How could they be burned out? Surely they can't be. We have hackathons, video consoles in the office. We keep the bar stocked with beer when we were all at work, of course, and people love hanging out at the office. While engagement is often seen as the opposite of burnout, the University of Cambridge published an article in February 2018 that showed even highly engaged employees are subject to burnout. The article cited a study published in 2018 by the Career Development International Journal, which states, interestingly, many employees appear to be optimally engaged while they are burned out and considering leaving the company. The article observed the highest turnover intentions were reported by the highly engaged, exhausted group, higher than even the unengaged group that might be commonly expected to be eyeing an exit. So I can be highly engaged and exhausted and want a way out. Well, why is this? Well, there's an individual cost to burnout. Ignoring burnout can present significant consequences to individuals. When we first gave this talk in April 2019, I can't believe it's been over a year, babe, in New York City, there was no medical diagnosis for burnout. However, in late May of 2019, the World Health Organization reclassified burnout as a legitimate diagnosis. The Mayo Clinic has a list of symptoms, which include, number one, physical illness like fatigue and high blood pressure. We don't want that. Psychological distress, including sadness, irritability, anger, and rage. I like our little symbols for that, even though these are not good things. And of course, lastly, increased sick days and visits to emergency room. These symptoms add up and have real world ramifications in addition to their impact on our work and our personal lives. Harvard Business School found in 2015 that workplace stress contributes up to 8% of the national spending on healthcare. If you don't happen to know how much national spending on healthcare was in 2015, it's about $190 billion. The biggest factor in these costs, high demands at work, which accounted for about $48 billion in spending. Furthermore, approximately 120,000 people die each year of stress at work. That's horrible. We do not want that. Now we want to make it clear that stress and burnout are not the same thing. Stress is one of the factors that can lead to burnout. However, it's clear that stress and those who succumb to burnout results in costs that directly impact the bottom line of companies. Given the cost of stress and burnout, it's not surprising that it's a problem that a lot of people try to solve. Anjuan will go over some of those common solutions next.
Wow, when you think about the cost of burnout, right? Billions of dollars and so many people who have died because of burnout, you almost wonder, is this talk about burnout or about Thanos? Well, the fact is that because burnout is such a common problem, many people, both as a set of corporations and as individuals, have tried to solve the problem. And we found in our research that these problems are fairly common, but they often come up short. So we're going to talk about both in the next few slides. So let's talk about how corporations try to solve burnout. I've been very privileged as someone who has worked in technology for over 20 years to have gone to a lot of software development companies. I've been to GitHub in San Francisco. I've been to Mailchimp in Atlanta. I've been to Prezi in Budapest. And you go into these offices and they're in these magnificently designed buildings of steel and stone and glass. And there's often these beautiful break rooms and there's foosball tables and you can play table tennis and all these amenities that are there to help the people who work there feel like royalty. But sometimes royalty winds up at the red wedding. And no matter how plush your office is, when your team gets to that point, there's really not a lot that you can do to get them out of the damage of stress, unless you're very intentional about it. And the reality is that these amenities and these techniques are often there when times are good. But when we hit a recession or some downturn in the economy, often these things are the first things that get cut. And so we wanted to create a framework that was beyond what corporations would do. It had to be effective, but it had to be a way that people without privilege could access and take hold of these techniques. And so we want to do something more than what we've seen corporations do. So Aneika is going to talk about how individuals try to mitigate stress and avoid burnout.
Love this picture, of course, boots on the beach. I don't know, but given the often precarious availability of help from their companies, individuals often try to come up with their own solutions to burnout. However, people are often bad at effectively dealing with stress, meaning they actually don't solve the problem. We often go to excess by abusing food, drugs, alcohol, or we turn to escapism by doing things like taking exciting, extravagant trips. Well, those aren't bad things, but how many of us actually love to practice self-care by taking a vacation? But with our current social media environment, even self-care becomes a performance. People are often, unfortunately, falling off the Grand Canyon trying to get the perfect selfie for Instagram and Snapchat. And that really defeats the point. We're trying to build and reinvigorate ourselves. But we work to show people how much we're not working. Also, escapism usually requires access to wealth that isn't available to everyone in tech or in academia. So some people have the funds to go on these trips, or maybe others do not. So corporate efforts are often undermined by concerns about the success of the business, and individuals' efforts often lack efficacy and accessibility. So the solution to burnout has to involve simple and effective practices for managing stress. As we look for a model for addressing burnout in tech and other industries, we wanted a framework that would be effective yet not require privilege to access. We found a three-part plan that we've seen in our own lives as well as the lives of software engineers. We want this plan to be accessible so they are geared around practices that individuals can immediately implement with very little cost. However, for each part of the model, we also have a point or two for what companies can do given the budget and if they have the willingness to tackle burnout. It can't be ignored. We have to we have a lot to share about this framework, but we want to make sure we specify clear calls to action. So in each part, we'll share something we call the one thing you simply must do that we think are best ways to start burning down burnout. Before we go into our model, Anjuan will give you some inspiration behind it.
Right. So I'm sure that many of you watching this have used a burnout chart, but just to make sure we're all using the same terminology, I'm going to quickly describe what a burnout chart is. Now, I'm an engineering manager and I've also done work as a scrum master. And so it really comes from the world of agile software development. So the way a burnout chart works is that you have the horizontal axis, which is time, you have the vertical axis, which is work. And so the idea is that over a period of time, this ideal line will guide the team, showing what would happen if the team perfectly burned down the work evenly over the 10-day period as shown in this example. And so we have the work, and then we see that as we do the work, we'll burn it down, and that the work left to be done will hopefully become less as we go throughout the time period that we're trying to specify in this 10-day cycle, usually referred to as a sprint. And so this work becomes what we're trying to burn down. We're trying to burn down the work so that by the time we're over, by the time the sprint is over, then it's down to zero. Now, I've used a lot of burn down charts with many teams across multiple companies. I'm sure that many of you have seen this. Some of you may go through it every day during your daily stand-up. But as I worked with burn down charts and often worked late at night looking at them, I realized that as an engineering manager who cares about my team, but also as a person, I had to do more than burn down work. I realized that there are certain things I needed to burn down to deal with the stress that my team was under. And that was really the model and really the thing that was the inspiration for this talk, that we needed to burn down certain things, just like we burn down work. And that's really how we came up with this talk. And so a lot of what we try to do in this talk is be very action oriented to make sure that everyone can have things that they can take even right after this talk is done and begin implementing into your daily life.
Burning down barriers. I love this picture. Eye contact is so powerful. It's so meaningful. As human beings, we want to make sure that we have people, we look them in the eye. I know it's difficult with all these Zoom meetings, but just that human connection is really important. So we all need a network of people who will walk through our lives with us. Human beings are actually built for relationships. That's why when, unfortunately, if someone goes to prison, one of the worst things that they can do to you is put you in isolations. We need other people. So it becomes cliche, but if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, well, let's go together. In our research into burnout, we've seen human relationships cited as a key way to protect against burnout. As members of software development teams, it's vital to burn down barriers between you and the people you work with. You should also foster an environment of open discussion where every team member feels empowered to share their ideas. Even if you're not the manager, you should also recognize good work, ideally immediately after it occurs. However, make sure you know how each team member likes to be recognized. Some people may want it done privately, while others don't mind public praise. Also, some prefer written recognition, while others want it to be said verbally. There are low-cost ways to strengthen your relationships with your teams, but companies can also help. They can incentivize socializing around shared interests, or companies can Give out gift cards that can only be used if 2 or 3 or more people take part in the purchase or the activity. So the one thing you simply must do is have regular meetings with people in person. This can be anywhere, like in a coffee shop, a restaurant, a park, but it should be at least once a month. And with COVID-19, then of course, perhaps a park is a good idea because you can easily kind of space out and everybody bring their own food. That would be nice. Pick the one thing that is causing you the most stress in your life and share it with the people in that group. While they may not be able to solve the problem, they can offer support and sympathy. And one will cover burning down distractions.
Yeah, I'm going to cover that. I just want to linger a little bit here because burning down barriers and building up relationships is so important. And I want to share a word for introverts. If you're an introvert like me, where you recharge in solitude and you really can be drained by being around people, even people like us, people who are introverts, we need these connections. We need to have someone who's walking through life with us. So I really want to spend time as you go through this first part of our 3-part framework, really doubling down on this idea that we need to have connections with other humans in order to really properly manage stress. All right, the second part of our framework is what we call burning down distractions, and that's harnessing the power of focus to truly get things done. You know, we live in a world where there's always things distracting us. There are notifications on our phones, and people can contact us in so many ways, either calling us, texting us, sending an email, walking up and talking to us. And it can be so distracting having those interruptions. And it really blinds us to the truth that our attention is finite. We only have so much attention that we can spend throughout a day. And if you're not careful, you can not even get to the end of your day, but have your attention totally drained away so that when there's things that come your way, you don't even have the resources to address them. And the key to this, the key to burning down distractions is really the simple power of no. We have to be willing to tell people, no, that's not something that I can work on right now. Or even to social media, no, I'm not going to check you right now because I need to harness my attention right now. Every tweet that we read, every Instagram post that we like, nicks away and ticks away at our attention. And it's really important to really get to the power of this, that we have to identify what's really valuable to me, what really is important in my life. And by doing that, by really focusing on what we think is really valuable, that's the way that we can identify those things and really get our action and our attention lined up with making a difference in those areas. So just take some time right now, even as you're watching this, to think about what's really valuable to me. And if you think about it, it's probably not 20 or 30 things, even though your task list may be 20 or 30 things long, it's probably 1 or 2. And so we really have to do the work of narrowing it down. What are our core values and making sure that we give our attention enough space to progress those values and make them real. Now, the one thing that you simply must do to make a real dent is to get off social media. And I know that that's a lot to say, that some people may have fallen out of your chair, but yes, I recommend getting off of social media. But if you can't do that, at least take a fast from it. I recommend at least a month, uninstall the social media apps from your phone, and you will be amazed at how much of your attention you get back. That your attention is not being drained by tweets and retweets and comments and likes, but you'll be able to harness that freed up attention to really make a difference and to really get the values that you hold dear progress and make them real. So even if that's too much, right? Even if a 1 month fast, I would say at least put into a time box and say, okay, only between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. or whatever hour period works, I'm going to get my social media fix, and then I'm not going to shake it again until the next day. And I'm really trying to simplify it down because I really think people underestimate how much we lose out by always being on social media. And so that's one thing that I really encourage you to do in order to get your attention back.
Yoga, love that. I don't sunrise, sunset, beautiful. So our next point is burning down illness and a focus on health. Software developers often trade health for productivity. Productive people do. But this often results in a future loss of productivity that outweighs whatever was temporarily gained. Burnout takes a physical toll on our bodies, on our mental and physical health. But if we improve our health, then we can build up resistance to the effects of burnout. This includes getting adequate sleep and staying hydrated throughout the day, especially in Texas where we live. We have to make sure we have that water and that we're taking care of ourselves. It's also important to get regular exercise and improve our nutrition. Companies can contribute to the health of their employees by doing yoga in the office, paying for gym memberships, and giving people mandatory no work times each week. These no work times shouldn't come from their vacation, and while they don't have to go to the gym, they should be encouraged to do so. So I like the no work times where we might say from 6 to 9, no emails, no phone, no work, just engage, focus time with the family. So the one thing you simply must do: take walks. Working out often requires a fair amount of privilege to get access to weights and gym equipment. Working out can be time consuming, but most of us can take a walk. And for me, when I was doing my dissertation at Texas A&M University, pursuing my PhD, and I got really, really stressed because I wanted to do such a good job. I started implementing walks in the evenings, and it's just a part of our life. And Anjuan and I walk together almost every single day. So we can start small, walk around the block once a day, maybe after dinner. Walking is free. It's a simple way to invest in your health and burn down illness. We've covered a lot, and Anjuan will talk about how to balance everything out.
I just want to go back to this burn down chart because one of my favorite features of a burn down chart is this ideal line, right? It represents perfection. But I don't want people to get bogged down by perfection. You might be thinking, okay, this is a 3-part framework. It's really simple. It's my relationships, it's my focus, and it's my health. But even though this framework is really simple and we believe it's powerful, you can get burned out worrying about burnout. And we don't want that to happen to you. And so what this means is that with the ideal line, one thing I realized, having led many teams across many sprints, is that I don't get hung up if the ideal line is not where I want it to be, right? Maybe we are a little bit higher than we like to be, and we're not where we want to be with burning down the work. But I know that there's a tolerance range where I know that my team has time to recover before the sprint ends. And so there will be times in your life where you're not perfectly managing the stress in your life. You're not maybe meeting with people the way that you like to, or maybe you skip a couple weeks at the gym, or maybe you just are binging on social media. Well, that's okay, as long as you take regular intervals and regular checkpoints with yourself and say, okay, things are where I want them to be, and I need to make sure that I get back into working out, or I'm going to take those walks that I started doing so well for several weeks until I fell off. And it's really key to have those regular checkpoints, maybe once a week or once a month, and maybe with a partner to walk through this together. But you want to have those checkpoints. And so don't be too worried about not being perfect. It's really the practices that we're trying to enable you to take hold of today. So I just want to go into the fact that, again, the practices are really what matters. And I like this picture because it shows that these rocks are balanced, and it's really a balancing act. You won't ever be able to balance the stressors in your life, but that shouldn't be your goal. Your goal should be to know, when am I outside of my stress tolerance? When am I outside of this 3-part framework? And that you really make space and time to get back on track. And so again, those regular check-ins are really so important. And you don't have to perfectly manage the stress that you have in your life. You have to be committed to regular practices that protect your relationships, your attention, and your health. Now, I have a couple of things that we put together, and Aneika and I'm going to go through these. And that's really, what do you do when there are scarce resources? You all, Anjuan and Aneika, it's great that you've shared with us these 3-part framework items. And yep, I can see how they are actionable, but what do we do when I don't have even enough to do that? And so we have a couple of slides. I'm going to go through the first 2. Aneika's going to do the last one. Going through this framework, what can we do to really put boots on the ground and make progress? So you might be saying, hey, and again, I mentioned this, I'm an introvert, or I just don't have access to a lot of people. Maybe I live in an area where I don't even feel safe going out and meeting with people at a coffee shop or something. Well, if you're an introvert, or if you don't have easy access to people, one simple thing that you can do if you have scarcity of people around you is to volunteer. And that means that you find a cause that really speaks to you, that makes your heart sing. And then you find those like-minded individuals who are organizing to make that cause a reality. And you can usually find these online, or maybe if you do have in your local neighborhood access. But I highly recommend joining this group. And a lot of groups are meeting virtually where you can even not have to leave your house and you can still take part. You can take part in planning, you can take part in brainstorming how you can make this call something that becomes real and that you move forward. And I know that when I've been able to volunteer and be able to be engaged in the community, then you get the sense of belonging to something bigger than yourself. And then not only that, but then you can connect with people who are also engaged in making that cause a reality. And so that can be extremely empowering as something to do. So if you can't do anything, get involved. Volunteering is a way to almost get automatic relationships where you know that you have a shared interest with a group of people. All right, so that's the first thing I think can put things where you can pick it up. Now you may think, well, yeah, I understand that my attention is finite. And you talk about social media, I don't even have a social media account because I stayed off that train a long time ago. Well, good for you. But I think that one simple thing that you can do, even if you have scarce resource, is just journal. And that's getting a pen and getting a piece of paper or a notebook and just writing down what's happening to you. And I really do recommend that you don't type it out on your phone or using a computer keyboard, but you actually write, because the act of writing actually reinforces memory, and it helps you to really feel that you're getting things out. Because one of the biggest things that I really enjoyed when I started journaling is getting things out of my head, right? There's just so many times when I have a lot in my head, and if I write it down, then I don't have to be afraid that I'm going to lose it. And that's a powerful aspect of journaling. But one other aspect of journaling that is really part of how this practice is so powerful is that I've gone back to journals that I wrote years ago, and I look at the things that were bothering me back then, and I don't even really care about those things. Like, that didn't even become a problem, or that was a lot bigger than I thought it would be. And by looking back on my past journal entries about my pain, that gives me hope that my current pain will one day be as irrelevant, that I can see that this is going to be something that will be worked out. And so by having that almost literal physical backup of your brain in the form of journals gives you perspective on what's happening to you today. And I think it's going to talk about the simplicity, the simple thing that you can do to take care of your health.
Well, we have a big yellow screen here. Reminds me of Big Bird and a person walking. So we're going to drill down on that a little bit. So taking walks, like we talked about. And some of you are thinking that walks aren't enough. You have to work out, and I agree with that, and I'm with that. And I agree that working out is crucial for good health, but it can be intimidating. Do I use free weights or use machines, or do I stretch before or after? Do I do high weights? Do low reps? It's also easy to get distracted. What's the first thing most of us do when we decide to start working out? Well, we might buy workout clothes, or I can't tell you how many times people have purchased new shorts or new shirts or workout gloves and all kinds of gear when they say, oh, I'm going to start working out. And then all that stuff, unfortunately, sometimes goes down to the bottom of the drawer. After a few weeks of never being able to have the time or find the time or make the time to work out. And so the cycle continues when I start working out again and buying new clothes and so forth. So working out often requires a fair amount of privilege to gain access to weights, especially equipment, especially during COVID-19, where a lot of gyms are closing down. So let's just keep it simple. Again, we really want to encourage something that's simple and easy, and that's taking walks. Now you need clothes to walk outside, of course, but you don't need to buy new workout clothes. We want to start small. So you might want to just walk around the block, maybe once a day after dinner. It's free, and it's a simple way to invest in your health and burn down illness. So as software developers, most of you have used a burn down chart to track your work. So you already have this great metaphor for managing stress and avoiding the dangers of burnout. If you use what we shared with you to protect your hearts, minds, and bodies, you'll be more productive and model better behavior for your colleagues at work, as well as the people in your personal life, people you live with. Building software requires motivated individuals, and reaching out, removing distractions, and revitalizing yourself will improve what you can deliver to your company as well as to your end users and your stakeholders. Anjuan and I believe that healthy teams make healthy code, and burning down burnout will help you be a healthy member of your team. So we'll be rooting for you as you burn down the stressors in your life so that you can be the best version of yourself at work and also at home.
Thank you so much for listening to our talk. Again, we are rooting for you. We want to make sure that we continue the conversation. So this is how you can find us on Twitter and Instagram. Love a follow. We love a connection. And then we would also love to continue to talk with you about how you can get the stress in your life in a managed state and avoid burnout. All right, everyone. Thanks again. Take care.
All right. Thank you both for that talk. That was really great. And I know it's definitely, applicable generally in tech, but I definitely feel like, especially after everything this year, there's a lot of burnt out just from even day-to-day life, let alone work. So thank you both. Are they here? I know they're here, but I just want to make sure their video still comes up.
Hello, we are here.
There we go. Okay.
We could not unmute ourselves, but we're here.
Yeah, we are. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Good. Hello. So thank you for joining us for our Q&A. So one of the things I wanted to ask is, I know I heard a lot of your suggestions on getting off social media, and one of the things I heard a lot is quit watching the news because it's incredibly stressful. You mentioned a couple of times going for walks. Do you have suggestions on how to remember to engage in these? Because I know sometimes I should go for a walk, but after a week, I tend to just forget to do it. So sometimes things like this fall through the cracks.
Well, one thing for us is we actually overuse our phones. Probably we put a reminder in our phone, after dinner, 7:00, go for a walk. We encourage one another. So if you have a neighbor or a friend that, lives near you, if you can go walking with them, that would be good, and kind of decompress and share your day with one another. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that after a while, once you put the practices in place, they become habits.
Mm-hmm.
And then you won't even need the phone because you're getting the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And I also love that you mentioned volunteering. And I know I've had some friends that wonder why I'm always involved in some volunteer type of activity all the time. But I know you, Anjuan, had said when you volunteer, it helps you feel great, it helps you gain relationships. Do you have any good suggestions on how to find a group or a nonprofit or some other way to get involved with a group like that?
Yeah, a lot of them are again, if you have a faith-based link that you can find probably a synagogue or a mosque or a church in your area, if you're that inclined, that's a great way to get involved. But there's a lot of great technology groups. I'm a big fan of Black Girls Code, which is a very mission-driven group. They're a nonprofit, and they always like people to donate equipment or to mentor, and they're utilizing Zoom and other things like that. And so I think looking for nonprofits in the tech space, because we're all, I think, affiliated with technology, that's a great way to find a group to get involved with and probably find something that's aligned with what you're really passionate about.
Yeah. And then maybe after and before COVID, I know I used to also do a lot of volunteering for Habitat for Humanity. Just when you help other people, you just take the focus, all the ruminating that we may do, you think about other things, and it just really promotes mental health. For me, it does.
Yeah, and I volunteered with all girls robotics team. And since they're not meeting in person, they can't really build robots, but they've been trying to schedule all these things over Zoom and with other things. So it's kind of cool that still the volunteering opportunities have kind of popped up through that. Somebody had asked, how do you suggest talking to your company about ways they can, the company itself can help alleviate the burnout?
You want to take that one?
Well, one thing that's really important, I've been reading Brene Brown's Dare to Lead, and, just having the uncomfortable conversations. It may not be uncomfortable for some people. It really all depends on the culture of the organization. But if you have that psychological safety with your peers and with your subordinates, then I feel that sharing something like that hopefully should be palatable and to be received. But basically, just like we believe that healthy teams build healthy code, it takes healthy people to be involved and to be productive. And so it's not that they're losing anything by investing in the health of their employees or their team members. It's you're actually investing in them so they can be all they can be for themselves as well as for you. Anjuan?
Yeah, I've been in enterprise software development enterprise software development for a very long time. And just like you should not feel shy about asking your manager about hey, I need more RAM or I need a faster computer to do my job. Taking consideration for your human body is part of doing your job. And the ability to present the best version of yourself, the most balanced and with stress in a managed state, that will benefit the company. And so I think that just like you would be as well to say that the physical tools that I have right now aren't really suitable to me doing my best work, you should say, look, I'm managing these items here that will help me bring my best self to work. And hopefully if you frame it that way, then your boss will see that as easy to approve as an upgrade in RAM or adding more CPUs or an SSD hard drive.
Right. But I just want to say, I'm just glad that you all would even accept or promote a session like this, because we need to normalize health and balance. I mean, I remember when I was a consultant, I literally felt guilty asking to go have dinner at 7 o'clock because they just wanted you to work constantly. And I think just normalizing, we have to eat, we have to drink water, we have to get enough sleep. That is just a part of the human experience. And it seems weird saying that, but I definitely remember being in a world where I literally felt guilty to just ask for the basic things I needed to be the healthy Aneika.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. We need actually more of these kinds of talks in a lot of our conferences and events. And in fact, I've been trying to watch some of the faces on the talk on the call while reading some of the Slack comments, and so much I kept seeing like, oh my God, I need this talk. I need this talk. I need this talk. So that's been great to see. Another question, somebody had mentioned that they get a lot of stress from work. It's things they can't control, like a really high workload, management being fairly distrustful of them, things like that. Do you have suggestions on how to start making progress on burnout prevention when you can't really interact with things like that?
I think one thing that Anjuan and I talk a lot about is we use, I guess, timelines a lot. So if you were to talk to your manager and you would say, these are the things that I have to do, then you would say, okay, these are the 10 things that I have to do. So in these few days and hours, I would do this and I would do this. And maybe if you walk them through it, then maybe they would be able to come to the realization, wow, it is unrealistic that we're having you do all of this. Maybe we should cut off of these 10 things, 8 and 9. So it will take some work. The framing, always, address people with dignity and respect, what I'm sure everyone will. But unless you let people know what you're feeling and going through, they may not know. And, an old adage that we hear is the squeaky wheel gets the oil. I mean, that sounds kind of, bizarre, but it's the truth. Like, if you don't say it, then they don't know. And so we've got to, and I remember as a consultant, I had to, get strong within myself and say, hey, I have to go eat dinner, and not ask and just kind of like say it. And it seems weird, but a lot of it depends on where you work in the culture of the organization, where those conversations could be easier to have than others. Anjuan?
I think all that's good. I think that if possible, well, before I say this, your essential humanity and being treated with dignity and respect is not something that you should have to ask for, right? That's something that as a human being you should get. The reality is that we live in a capitalist society where often people are treated and viewed as simple resources, and that's the unfortunate reality of where we live. But what you can do is hopefully use that to your advantage. In the ideal world, you'll have a track record of performance that is showing that you are valued to the organization. And you can hopefully leverage that track record before you hit that burnout state and say, look, for me to continue doing these things and delivering at this level and meeting the things that you want me to do, and sometimes you have to appeal to people's egos and say, these are things that I need. These are the accommodations that I need to continue to be this person for you. And often if you have that track record that you've established, if you dig your well before you're thirsty, then you'll be able to leverage that, hopefully, to get some accommodations for what you need.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you both very much for both your talk and all these great answers to these great questions.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference.